Where's your iPad?
Kindle Fire. Did you see the Kindle Fire? $180. It does the same thing as an iPad.
No, it doesn't.
It does. They just introduced it today.
It's slower.
I may change
I threw them off the scene.
They just introduced it today.
I know it. 1
Kindle
o'clock.
Fire.
1 o'clock. October 5th, iPhone 5.
I know. Wait.
You're rich. You're gonna yeah.
I can't upgrade it.
It's gonna be required.
It's going to be required.
Yeah, I just passed it. Oh, you can just.
If he pays for it, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Want me to run it?
It's your budget and finance meeting.
All right, I'll call this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. What we have tonight in front of you is a 2012 preliminary budget. There was a copy emailed from Craig. And since that copy was emailed, I see Craig has given us a new copy and a memorandum. So, Mr. Neely, I guess we'll defer to you to go over the memorandum first. Any substantial changes we can look at from that memorandum, and then we can discuss individual points of view on it.
All right, well, let me just, there's actually a lot for me to say in our introduction and also subject to discussion. The revised preliminary budget that you have on your desk is there primarily because yesterday morning we received some good news. Over the last week, we got information from Conrad Siegel that the state pension aid this year for all municipalities was going to be substantially higher than we had notified. What happens is every fall we receive a notice from the state that you're going to receive a certain amount of pension aid in the upcoming year. And that's how we actually come up with your line item that you'll find on page 2 under intergovernmental revenues, the last entry, 355,140.
I'm sorry, what?
355,140.
Page 2 of the copy.
We're at 2011 budget, 245,848. We come up with that number is we received correspondence from the state that says we anticipate your state aid next year to be 245,848. Well, in the last week, 10 days, we've got some notification from Conrad Siegel, other sources also, that there was going to be a substantial increase in distribution for this year. And in fact, there was. Yesterday we received information that it was going to be $408,000, not $248,000, which is good. That, as a result, allowed me to increase what I had for the cash carryover for the upcoming year, even though, I mean, that is just a plain shot in the dark. I had it at $200,000, and that was really just, it's a placeholder at this point.
Could you go back 1 second?
Yeah.
The state pension, do you mean 405? Because it says 405 here.
Right, that's under 212 budget.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it said 408. I
He
believe.
did say 408.
It was 4.
It is for it in the memo.
The amount that we received for 2011 is $408,000.
Okay.
Okay,
And you're budgeting 405.
for 2012, but we learned today that there's questions as to whether or not we can rely upon that for 2012. After I actually prepared this. So, the numbers that changed for the 2012 budget is that 355,140 plus the fund balance on the first page, which is 340,120. okay, under interest rents, fund balance, I put in 350 now instead of the 200, even though I caution that 200 that I had, that is not in any way a reliable thing. We have the best time that we can gauge this is after the second bill list in October. So what that number is there to do is, in a way, just give us something to work with that has some relationship to reality, albeit not a lot, so that we at least can finish up the preliminary budget to give us something to work with. Okay.
And the last, the pension that you have in the number there, you know how I was saying fully funded or the act, whatever it is, where you can go 75%? Is this fully funded or is it still at the 75% level?
The budget is prepared in terms of the expense.
Right.
Okay, that's expensed out in other parts of the budget. The expensed out was the 75%. Okay. So that's what resulted in this revised preliminary budget being on your desk. Now, the memorandum is lengthy. It's 7 pages. The reason it's lengthy is because with using the certain assumptions, okay, the assumptions that I used are that wages, for preliminary purposes only, the assumptions were that all employees would receive a 3.9% increase. All benefits for non-union employees would remain the same. There are no concessions from the unions. Health insurance increase at 6%, and the level of staffing of all the departments would remain the same. So those are the basic assumptions. And once you make those assumptions, then that dictates what the majority of your line items are going to be. Okay? Then what I do in this memorandum is I go through a lot of analysis in terms of ways to, the available ways that I see to cut expenses in the budget. Okay? The reason I do it that way is because in the preliminary budget that I prepared, there's a deficit in the general fund of $170,000. And there's not much of what I consider discretionary spending in that general fund budget. $80,000 of the general fund is then moved to capital. And that's the 80th budget for the general fund. That's the, if you go to capital reserve, I did this subsequent to the preliminary budget, is you'll see a transfer to capital of $80,000. That's the only funding that is in the preliminary budget going to the capital reserve fund. There's a total of $982,000 of capital requests from department heads, leaving $900,000 of capital requests currently being unfunded in the preliminary budget. So, what I did then in the memorandum is I looked at the preliminary budget as a starting point and thought that if I anticipate that what council is going to want to do is look at areas where we can then cut expenses. And after we have the end of September numbers, what I'll do, and I know Mr. Reinhardt asked that we have a column for up-to-date expenses so far this year. I didn't want to do it at the end of August, which we have, because we're only a couple days away. And if Kathy has to input every single line to do that. And I thought, well, don't do it in the preliminary budget. Once we get to the next one, then I'll put those figures in here. That'll make it a little bit easier. But the majority of the expenses, once you, based upon the assumptions that I made, and then based upon historical performance, things like office supplies, things like that. I think they're pretty reasonable, they're pretty accepted. Performance of those is consistent from year to year, so most of them are still the same. But if what council wants to do is take this budget and say, is there a way to make this work without having any kind of tax increases, fee increases, or rate increases. Is there a way to get that done? That's always the goal. We always like to do that. Now, that means we have to look at this $170,000 deficit in the general fund and figure out there's a way to resolve that. Water and sewer funds, if Mr. Clapper put in capital requests, then there's a deficit in each of those, but if you didn't do some of the capital things, they'll balance. You know, they wouldn't get the capital stuff done, but they can balance. It comes down to then the general fund, and based upon the assumptions that we made, seeing if there's ways to cut expenses. And then in the memorandum, and this begins on page 3. And what I did is went through a number of possible ways to save. And I'm not putting it in here because I'm suggesting that we do them. They are just ways to do it. And it's going to be up to council to decide if it wants to do any, some, or all of these things. So what I'll do is I just want to go through and identify them. And I thought that the best way to do this is to leave you with just the analysis that I have, and then it takes some time to really think about these things, because the impacts of them, some of them are not just financial, they have other inside of them. And you'll see as we go through this. Start on page 3 under Roman numeral 5. One is non-union staff. No pay increase for next year. Again, these are just all options. Health insurance premiums. Last year we had a 6% increase. And in October, October 11th is the meeting of the consortium. We'll know what our increase is for next year. Based upon the amount of dividends we've gotten back the last couple of years, I'm just anticipating us doing better than prior years. So that may go down to 5, it may go down to 4. The lowest last year of any municipality in the consortium was 4%. Therefore, I would expect it to go less than that. But that part of the budget may change. And just for information, for each 1% change in premium, that will equate to $14,825. That is, if it was 6% to 5%, the total amount difference that would save between the 6 and the 5 would be $14,825. Of course, we twice that much went down to 4, but if it went up to 7, it would be plus 14%. I'll go through that under health insurance premium, which would be
Craig, when would you actually find those hard numbers?
October 11th. And at that meeting, they gave us some idea as to what our insurance dividend may be. Now, the last 2 years, I'm sure everybody recalls that we really under budgeted that line. When we had what I thought was a windfall in 2010, we wouldn't be conservative again in last year's budget, and we did budget $65,000, ended up getting $180,000 back. So based upon that, or for the preliminary budget, what I did is I used $125,000 as the insurance dividend. Now that's getting aggressive. That's on page 1 of the preliminary budget under interest rents. Second went down 340.123. It may more accurately reflect what we're going to receive, and if we anticipate receiving those types of revenues, we ought to be budgeted for. So we'll know more on the left as to whether or not we're in the ballpark. Going back to the memorandum, that is community and economic development. Currently, there's only 3 items being funded. There's civic celebrations, senior citizens, and SBC department. And I look at ways that those can be modified if you want to save some money there. Emmaus Public Library, so you're at $117,000. Policy has always been to fund the library 100%. But again, what the council is doing is looking at what are the possible places to save money. What we can cut, you have to say that the library is a possible place.
Quick question. Under this state code or borough code, how much are we mandated for support of the public library?
I'm not sure of that. And so if you're interested in looking into that, we can look into that.
I thought, the only reason I bring it up is that I thought we went over this,
I believe it was, you couldn't fund it less than the previous year. There's a certain amount per resident, but I think once you fund it to a certain level, you can't fund it less in following years. And now you can't fund it less than next year, I think. But now, municipalities try to fund it less, and the library fights against them. So there must be some loophole there in how you fund the library.
like Upper Milford.
Upper Milford was discussing funding less. I don't know what they decided, but they were discussing funding less. So there's got to be a way to fund less.
I believe there's a mechanism. There's probably some kind of limit, but that's something that if you want to get into it.
I don't recommend funding the library any less, but it's a good question. It's something good to understand.
Then contingency account line 480-501, I threw 50,000 there because historically I've done, you can go less than that if you're running a real tight budget. I wouldn't go less than 30,000. There was one time that we used it, and I don't remember when it was, a number of years ago. It wasn't used for a lot, but we used it for something. I think the other way one year. Police department staffing. One is get rid of the downtown office. The downtown officer did a great job, but it truly is it's discretionary. I mean, it's great to have it, but we would save more than 21,000 in the budget right now, the preliminary budget. Granted, there would be some decrease in revenues, but without a doubt there'd be a significant net savings by eliminating that position altogether. There's analysis there about the drug task force, which is complicated. And then last would be police officer layoffs. They indicate here the option always exists. I do not believe it should even be considered as an option. The council makes the decision. Same thing with the public works department. Only substantial savings I see now is to lay off employees. I think that would be the aspect of that morale. Fire department, we're talking about staffing levels. What did I see would be placement up there. Composting, Jeff and I talked about this, and I kept $28,054, which is for last year, which is the public works wages and also the equipment rental. And the reason I kept that is because we don't know at this point how this whole compost equipment thing is going to play out. We think it's going to save us some significant money. But there are so many variables that we can't even start looking at this point. I kept that the same. Now, as we go along, if we think of a way where we can reduce that, that's an area that we might be able to find some money. One thing that is in a way kind of hidden in the budget, you have to read a couple places, is Special Entertainment Commission, the Sunday concerts. Budget for that's $11,500, cost of the bands. I underestimate the printing line item to that is $500. It's more than that, but just say 500 to make it round, about 12,000 going into that. And the only revenue line item there is special entertainment donations, which is $4,500. And therefore, the borough, the general fund, the underwriting the concert series was $7,500. So that's an area that could be affected. And K, non-union employee health insurance contributions. If we use the 6%, premium increase for 2012, then if non-union employees would pay a percentage of premiums for every 5% of contribution by non-union employees, the borough would save $11,262. Then I go on to...
How many employees is that total?
Then, under collective bargaining and concessions, which is Roman numeral 6, if council wanted to seek concessions from the collective bargaining units, then what we have to do is notify them and do it relatively quickly that we would like to engage and maybe discuss to see if there's any interest on their part on granting concessions. If we don't approach the unions with an attempt to get concessions from them, then all those line items such as wages, benefits are ones that will be as they are in the preliminary budget. Then lastly, I just want to make a couple comments about the capital reserve fund and the need to do capital improvements. And that's more of a long-term kind of look into the future thing, and be wary that if we're not really making those expenditures now, so I hope that puts into perspective what I've tried to do with the preliminary budget. Frankly, with the way I see it, by as long as I have direction on where we want to go with stuff, the budget will be ready by the end of October. If the council would make decisions on what it wants to do, this budget will definitely be ready to be passed. But I don't think the decisions will be
You said November 1st?
it could be ready.
Yeah, I was thinking it'd be more prudent to do it later when we have more confirmed numbers, and not like another month's worth of expenses. I think if we do it in December.
Well, it's whatever council wants to do. All I'm saying is, from my perspective, last year, Christine and I were able to, we had initial indications that the cash carryover was going to be somewhere $400,000. And we didn't necessarily share that with everybody because we didn't know it. We didn't get everybody's hopes up. But that was around September we started getting those indications. And we agreed that we would wait until after the second bill list in October when we felt comfortable we'd be able to come up with a reasonable estimate, and we did. So I feel comfortable that from staff standpoint, this could be done by the end of October.
But there's no need to rush it.
No, really.
Okay.
I think when you read that, I think you see the decisions that have to be made are very, very, that's nothing, any other budget decisions are less significant, but the issues that are raised at this point are ones that I think are critical, not just for next year's budget, but for budgets that we will see in years after.
Do you have a number for the total workers' comp increase? I mean, I know it's 2 to 3 times.
The premium was about $305,000, which is $105,000 more than last year. It was a $55,000 deductible per claim. So the aggregate that I put in the budget for premium plus deductible was $350,000, $150,000 right there. And where the increased costs come from is you got $150,000 right there. You got health insurance at 6% is almost $100,000 right there. So now you're $250,000 out of the box, and you haven't even gotten to wages yet. As we talk about wages, you're another $100,000 there. So your expenses are going to be at least $350,000 more this year than they were last year, solely for those 3 items.
The revenue's rather flat.
And the revenue in the general fund is going to be flat. I think that's an interesting, it's an important thing to really understand our budget. The important things to look at are obviously the big revenue numbers. And all you got to do is go through the first 3 pages, and it's easy enough to see. The real estate tax, what I do is I take, I get a figure every year, early October, which is the official notice of the value of taxable parcels within the borough. And then I calculate whatever the tax rate's going to be, multiply that by 96.5% collection rate, and that becomes real estate tax. Well, everybody knows that's going to be flat. You know, the value of real estate's not going to be changing right now. And so the aggregate value of real estate that you're taxing is not going to change. So if the tax rate stays the same, that's not going to change, which is why you see it pretty much consistent from the last few years. Then you go to other bigger ones, earned income tax. That stayed relatively stable. In this economy, that actually is pretty good. It shows stability within the residents of the borough in terms of them working, and local services tax is good. mean, it stays stable. But again, without increasing any rates, you're not going to see substantial changes. They just aren't going to change. Same thing with licenses and permits. You're a cable franchise. It's maxed out at 5%. That's not going to change. It's the same every year. When you get the smaller numbers, which can vary from year to year, motor vehicle fines and non-traffic fines, state police, and they come in what they are. Our carryover balance has fluctuated from year to year to well last year. This year insurance dividends, they're a windfall. They're great. General authorities about the same. Intergovernmental revenues are pretty much the same. State pension revenue is a windfall. But again, we have no control over it. Ambulance. I mean, they've been running around 550 to 575 in revenue. And you know, if you don't change the way you do their operation, keep it the same level of staff, the same level of ambulances, you might see an increase here and there, but you're not going to see large increase in revenue there. Service charges, none of those are all that substantial. Except zoning permits and building permits, but those, again, fluctuations there, you might get another 10, 15,000. Most refuse bills, the refuse bills are what they are, they're going to stay the same. It's a big amount of money, but like we talked about last year, we were out to raise the refuse rate, we don't have to raise the service unless that's what we do. And the rest of them, they're not big revenue items. So you're not going to see increases in revenue.
The RFP, when they go out, if I remember correctly, Norma Country saved $25,000 on their insurance. Is there any possibility of us saving on our insurance when we bid that out?
Yeah, but that's not going to affect us.
Can you say later on?
When I met with the insurance people last Friday, and I'll follow up with everybody on this. I let them talk about 10 minutes before I connected. And they said that what they told me, and I think it was a gentleman from Spofford who was kind of leading the discussion, doesn't run any of our insurance. And he was speaking for the group, and he said, workers' comp is driving everything you do, and what you really want to do is wait until next spring to figure it out. So there might be savings.
I also remember reading somewhere, now that you brought workman's comp up, that it would be better for us to stay with the same company. I don't know if that's possible, because I don't know if I remember correctly, I think they dropped us, they wouldn't even offer us anything. But there was somewhere I read that in one of the memorandums or emails.
They gave us a notice of non-renewal because of the
Because there was one of the gentlemen, I don't know if it's somebody or Mike knew, that emailed that we're keeping the same, it would be better for us to keep the same company even if it costs us a little more.
Well, right, and that's what these guys were saying on Friday. The agreement keeping that carrier beginning in July was good. And what they said is that actually they believe that the EMC wrote the policy because they needed the auto policy also. They didn't keep those two together. And then they said on Friday, I deferred to them as the experts, they said you're now not even halfway into that policy period, and you'd be bidding this out. And that wouldn't be a good thing. He said the best thing that you can do is wait until the spring, probably March. And that was the agreement among the brokers that were interested in doing this. So in terms of savings, what that allows us to do is convert everything to July 1st policy.
What would be wrong with following through with the RFP, and if it costs more, we just keep with what we have? And if it comes in lower, then we go with the lower. I mean, is there any harm in doing that?
I don't know.
Is there any cost involved?
All I can say, Frank, is when if I had the insurance people here, 2 people have our business, we split our business already, another one has none of our business, and all 3 of them tell me that if you bid it out now, it's not the right time to do it. You're going to get hired for the numbers. Then what are you going to do? Bid it out again in the spring? I'm relying on that. If you don't, you're relying upon them down the wall. But especially, I thought it was interesting, Stoffers, when it doesn't have our insurance, and if he thought that he could do something competitive at this point, it certainly would be in his best interest to tell us right now. And you know what, much you don't do this. Because if he thinks he can bring it lower, he's going to get that business.
I just, I'm looking at it from the point, if there's no cost involved, what's the harm in trying it if it's gonna come in lower? I mean, if it comes in higher, you keep what you have. In my opinion, there's something to lose.
Any opinion on that car, or the one that has the fixed insurance? I mean, is there an issue with bidding something? I mean, I'm fine with waiting to go on Brent's philosophy, just throw it out there. If they're all higher, do they then look at those rates? Do they hold those rates for a year so we can't bid again, or do we have any?
Yeah, they wouldn't be held for a year, but the way that the RFP was written was trying to consolidate everything with one captain. And that's the way that it was explained to me. The Stauffer agency, my agency, have been friendly competitors since I've been alive. With David's Grove's father, Bruce, my father, working together with some carrier representation back in the 70s. He gave me a call last week before that meeting, just sort of going through. I haven't seen any revision of the RFP. It just gave me some of his concerns, and I said, well, write it in an email and let me pass it forward so that those questions can be addressed prior to you guys showing up. So they have you have a game plan, which even the GA forwarded to you now. Dealing with quoting it out, those carriers aren't going to want to quote it out now if they know they're going to get back into a competitive situation on July 1st. Because they're just spinning their wheels. And they know it's going to be back up on the block to be bid out again. So you're wasting your time almost doing it now because you're going to make them do it again later. So they're not going to put forth their best efforts and ask for their best rates, only to have to guard that and try to retain it again on July 1st. That's the problem. Now, could we ask them to do that? We certainly can. Are we going to get their best efforts? Probably not. It's one of those things that, from the beginning, why NCs go the RFP way. Slowed the whole process up. We created a backlog that we now fell behind, and we have to wait again.
So what is the best way to do it, since we can start new if we're gonna do it in spring?
I start keeping those lists available, let them know. Ideally, you want to give them about 2 to 3 months notice.
Start in January?
Start in January wouldn't be about, well, it's a little too far ahead, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to start thinking about it sooner rather than later. I think we started talking about the RFP in February. That would have been a great time to start bringing these people in and asking for the professional services.
Thank you.
Now, revenue for compost. We see an increase. I know we raised rates for selling compost. So I was assuming maybe you could double that. I mean, it's not a large amount, but that one may be doubleable. And then the equipment rentals, are we assuming they're all going to go back into the maintenance of the equipment, or are we assuming we'll make a revenue when they fall?
No, we are not going to make any revenue towards the borough for that, running out that equipment.
Okay.
No, we can't. I mean, we're really serving as a conduit to make the equipment available.
Okay.
We're the middleman.
Yeah, one of the benefits that we take is we are keeping track of all of our time administering. And between Jeff, Paula, anybody who's putting time into administering this, and that then we're allowed to offset our grinding costs. Because whatever we use, we keep track of the hours. And we essentially would be charged just like everybody else. The hourly rate. Now, our hourly rate is less than what we were paying the county, so that actually we're going to cost down, but in addition, we're going to be offsetting those costs with the time that we put in. So, we're not going to get revenue that way for rental, but we will reduce our costs. So there is a mechanism.
Okay. Now, the sale of compost is in here somewhere. Can that line item be increased? I see it stayed the same. It's 364, 350 sale of compost.
We can.
I don't know if that can double. I don't know if there's a question you have to ask Jeff, but I know we doubled the price, so. Sale of
Bottom of
compost.
page 2.
Is that 4,500? I mean, I don't know what you're comfortable with, Craig, but
Make it 8,000.
there's a few thousand at least that hopefully can come in. Mr. Reinhardt.
Well, that may be an area to take a look at. I think we're missing the bigger picture in front of us. preliminary budget, although not finalized, Mr. Rodriguez, is showing us $170,000 deficit already from the general fund. I can tell you already that we have $170,000 surplus from the refuse collection that we build out for contracted services, plus some allocated towards the compost. So we collected $170,000 at least, more than we needed to from our borough residents right there. We have another $125,000 budgeted here as an insurance dividend that we didn't expect, that we can expect to get sometimes, but we can't guarantee on every single year. We're now having a large amount of money we shouldn't be either collecting or expecting to get, funding a deficit as it is. We need to take a hard look at our operational facts and processes, procedures that we're doing. There's a huge hole here before we get to anything that's capital. That's a problem. That needs to be identified. We're talking about a couple thousand for selling compost.
Well, I mean, I understand the bigger picture, and I think we're all gonna need some time to think about the bigger picture and decide what we're comfortable with, and I don't think this is the forum to do it. I prefer to personally go over this and think, where am I comfortable and what suggestions can we make to come up with $170,000? I mean, there's some very difficult decisions to be made. I think Mr. Neely spelled out what some of them are, and I'm sure we all have our personal idea of where more of them are. I don't know what they are right now. I mean, I know what he spelled out, but I don't know. I don't want to say right now, here's what we have to do. I think we need some time to digest that. Now, if you have personal questions, go right ahead. I mean, anything we can do right now would be helpful. That's fact and not opinion-based.
Well, not opinion-based, I'm mandated services that we must do at a bare minimum. What would that look like in this, from a budget? And then let's start building from there. We have a major hole if we're only filling this
So you're saying not have an ambulance department anymore? Not provide trash services anymore?
trash services, we must, as mandated services for that 101.
Recycling. We must collect trash and recycling because we have more than 10.
Yeah,
Why does the city of Bethlehem have to collect trash?
they do collect trash and they do collect recycling.
Everyone has their own independent hauler. The city of Bethlehem is a contract independently.
It's the obligations on the individual property. And technically speaking, municipalities are responsible to ensure the property owner will have to do it in Bethlehem, not DPL, which is tracking the individual property.
It's my opinion that we need to find out what's mandated, what's not mandated, go from there. Because if we didn't get this insurance dividend, what kind of hold are we looking at them? If we're not overbilling our refuse collection, what are we looking at then?
Well, you're seriously saying like eliminate all parks? Just don't have to sell them, don't have them anymore? I mean, parks aren't mandated.
Add them back in as funds become necessary. Where we have it. If we break down to just purely mandated things that we must do as a municipality, so we need to make sure that we provide water, and the sewer sanitation, the garbage. We have these core things we must do. That's government's responsibility. And then build from there. It's a tedious and long process, but with this kind of when we're just funding operational expenses at a deficit at this point, where do you start? We're gonna talk about a couple thousand here and there. That's not gonna make a dent. That's gonna lead us to someplace unless we get this big windfall of cash, which hopefully, the state comes through with that state aid. Hopefully our insurance dividend is enough, but it's still only funding operational costs.
Well, can you make a statement of what you, I'm not sure what you're saying you want to cut out of this budget.
I'm saying as of today, I would like to see this go back to the drawing board and find out what must we provide. So we have to provide the sewer fund, the water fund. Okay, those are their own entities, that's great. We then come back, okay, what do we have to work with then after those expenses are gone? That we still must do. We must do reference. Okay, that's an assessed value there. What's that going to be at? We then come back and look at the revenue. Okay, yes, we're going to bank on so much earned income tax. I mean, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the property tax at this point and a bunch of other things. We can cut out the insurance dividend. And let's just see, what do we have to work with and what will that fund that is mandated? Now, let's start building in, what services do we think we should be providing with these extra funds that are left from that which we're not going out from the property tax, enforcing the allocation of funds with. And let's start building from there. It's what would you do tomorrow if you lost your job? You had to go out and get a minimum wage paying job. What would you do as a homeowner? I mean, you just wouldn't say, oh, I'm done. I mean, you formulate a plan. What can I cut? What can I cut? What do we need to survive? What do I need to do to put bread on the table and keep a blanket over our shoulders and some kind of roof over my head?
I believe you're going to have to go home then and think about it and come back with what you want to cut.
Well,
I mean, this is the way we're doing the budget. We're not going to a whole new process of preparing a budget. We're not redoing everything. We're not asking Mr. Neely to go spend the next 3 days doing a whole new budget that means nothing to anyone but you.
I don't think it means just nothing.
Go ahead, Mr. Lightberg.
I think a lot of people.
Well, I think there's a middle ground of what he's saying. I understand what he's saying. I think he wants to more or less know what are we mandated to provide, and then everything above that is discretionary in his opinion. Now, I don't know if that's the view of council, but I mean, certainly some people on council would say the Main Street program is not something that's mandated, that we shouldn't have to fund if we're in a situation where we have a deficit. Or the concert series, and I'm not saying that it's right, but I'm just saying, those are all discretionary items. The summer program for the kids, those are all things that we're paying wages for. Maybe we charge for that program now where it offsets the fees that we pay out on the counselors. Or what do we call them? Counselors? Camp counselors? I know Laura McCunty charges like $25, so maybe we can come up with a fee. But the point is, maybe there's a middle ground of what R is saying. I don't think he's per se saying that somebody like Craig should write down only the things that are necessary or mandated. I think you're more or less saying we need to look at other things to cut, but do you want somebody to actually provide us what we should cut? I mean, he kind of did it in his memorandum. I know what you're saying. You want to strip it down to bare minimum.
And
then rebuild back up.
Right, and I understand that. I mean, more or less we can do that. I don't know. I mean, we pretty much know which ones are mandated. Now, there's some questions like the library. We didn't know what we actually have to fund and what we can cut back there, but that's all. I think there's a middle ground.
Thank you, Mr. Lightberg.
If I may, Mr. Holter, would just suggest that, I have visited the fire department, the police department, public works department, and the ambulance department. And the reason I visited them is to get a better grasp and knowledge on what they're operating, what they can do, and what they can do better. And one of the suggestions in here, in Craig's memorandum, is with the police department and with the drug task force officer.
I did not mean to suggest that.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
I brought it up in the past, so it would be
Option is a better word. Option
Yeah,
that Mr. Neely
yeah, I
said.
apologize. Yes, please. But if you see the results of what that officer does, it definitely gives you a different perspective. So the only suggestion I'm saying here is please visit our department heads and our departments to get a better grasp of what they're operating. And I think then you can also build as well from there. I mean, instead of just looking at numbers.
I'd rather raise taxes.
No, I didn't say
There's
that.
something with this council that
I didn't say
it's
I'm just
taboo
saying,
that
just
nobody
get
ever
perspective.
talks about, and that's layoffs. Nobody talks about it.
Well, I did layoffs the
Nate
first
brought
year.
it up and he got excoriated for it. Now, maybe he didn't do it the proper way, but he was new and he had an idea that he brought forward and he got hammered for it. But realistically, if we're going to reduce expenses, we have to seriously talk about layoffs. And I don't want to say I don't care. That's not the right word. But for us to say that it's going to hurt morale, what about all these companies that are laying people off? Do you think when a company or a CEO lays people off, he cares about morale? He's looking at the bottom line to survive. It's not about morale. It's about surviving and doing the right thing so that we can get our finances level. I mean, look at Harrisburg. They're bankrupt. I'm not saying we're anywhere close to that. But if you keep running where you're, like Cora said, expecting dividends or reimbursement for pensions, it only takes 1 year where you don't get $250,000, and now you're looking at not only not having any capital project, but raising taxes just to have a balanced budget. So we have to seriously talk about layoffs, and I don't know where you do that. You do it temporarily. You always hear about state workers having furloughs and stuff. I don't see why this council doesn't, they're just dead set against doing it, but I think it should be a serious conversation, because it could just be temporarily until the economy picks up, and then we rehire again. But I'm just saying, that should be on the table. And it's not a morale issue. Of course it's going to affect morale. It affects morale anywhere somebody gets laid off. They're freezing full-time jobs where I work and hiring part-timers instead. Now, is anybody happy about that? No, but everybody understands you're doing it to stay competitive so that everyone else can have a job.
Other comments? Department heads, anything you'd like to add, provide?
No, that's really yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'll say sign in.
No, that's not even on. You can just sit at the table.
Sit at the table?
Yeah. I think it's this, I guess you more formal.
And where are the other departments? Were they budget?
Yeah. I told them it wasn't necessary for them to be here.
Oh, that's right, we did.
If they could come, they're more than welcome. I sent a reminder now. I don't have any plans of cutting their budgets tonight or going through their budgets even, so I didn't know that it was important for them to be here.
No, simply, what I would like to say is I'd like to make 2 points. One is, certainly you have to prioritize times like these and budgets like we've had the last several years, and I think all of us have cut discretionary funding down to the bone. There's no question on that. Also, complimentary to council that we've been able to, these past few budgets, maintain the status quo at the very least, meaning that we've been able to replace employees, maintain those employees, not necessarily add additional ones, but we've been replacing employees, and that's to your credit, to that the team. And I think there's an importance to that, because there's certain services that the community has come to expect, but when we get to ours point, that what are your basic needs? And I think if you were to ask your residents, you're going to want that clean water, and they're going to want sewage, and they're going to want the garbage to be picked up. But they're also going to want to be safe in their communities. And public safety generally, typically throughout municipalities across the country, is a large chunk of the pie. Police, fire, and EMS tends to be your greatest percentage of wages and benefits, and that's not atypical from Chicago, Illinois, down to the smallest borough in the state. And I think, sure, our residents have come to expect certain things, and there are services that we can look at as a team that would be cut. What I would ask of all of you is, before you do that you have workshop discussions with your department heads who might know of areas that they would want to cut prior to some of the others that you might think are less or more important to you. I think a couple of those were mentioned tonight. But what becomes a necessity versus a commodity? What things are we doing that maybe we don't necessarily have to do in public safety, but what are our basic needs? We want to keep you all safe. That's my job. We're in a year where we've seen 5 armed bank robberies, a homicide, 2 major cases in front of the grand jury, and we're about to go into another one. That takes a tremendous amount of resources, people, and manpower to do that. Why is that? Is it because Emmaus is now a bad place? No, it isn't. I think you should look around you and you see in the Lehigh Valley that these changes have been upon us and coming for years, and I've been mentioning that to many of you that have been here for a while. So when you make these decisions, what I ask of all of you is to put a lot of thought into what is out there in this community that you might not necessarily need, but what should we expect our residents from them? What do they want? And I think you're gonna find that they're gonna want those basic needs. They're gonna wanna be safe in their community, they're gonna want clean water and sewage, they're gonna want a fire truck to show up when there's a fire, and an ambulance when a person is stricken, and a police officer when they're needed. Certainly, our costs are gonna go up because the costs are going up for everybody. But point one is, thank you all for your commitment to the entire borough, because I've seen every employee position replaced in the last several years. We're about to interview for more candidates tomorrow night, actually, for some police officer vacancies that are desperately needed. And I do welcome all of you to come in, just as Councilman Brown mentioned, and spend some time and actually see what the amount of workload that these people are putting in. And I'm not trying to one-up the fire department or public works. We have very dedicated employees here. I think the question becomes, what do you want to cut in terms of services once we get to that? What I ask of you is not to just arbitrarily say, well, we're going to cut a police officer first. Their salaries are a little bit higher than the public works guy. I think we need to talk about what we all feel is the best and make an informed decision then about services and about parks, about what you might think we are doing that we don't have to do. The borough manager and I had a discussion this week about the downtown officer, and I'm being beat up over that because the merchants won it yesterday. And I know you all voted in favor of doing that, and certainly we're moving forward in doing that. And our last officer did an exceptional job down there. But is it a necessity? If you're going to come into my office and we're down to brass tacks and we're going to talk about what needs to go, I think your department heads, your fire chief, your police chief, your ambulance chief, Jeff Clapper, and all those folks tend to know those things maybe better than the average person. Why? Because we're out there in the trenches every day. So please, before you just arbitrarily say it's a police officer, it's two public works people, it's a fireman, let's sit down and talk those strategies out on the table and then decide what's the best informed decision. And of course, department heads, employees also see some of the things out there that we do that are extra. Clearly, we see that. Because there's some of the ones out there doing it. It's that critical now that we're down to discretionary funds are all gone. I think for the most part in our budget they are. And how do we maintain the status quo? How do we ensure that there's at least 2 or 3 police officers out there around the clock 24/7? It would probably surprise you to know that not since 1979 have we worked 2 officer shifts in the borough of Emmaus. And I called some of the officers who were working during that time frame, and I asked them, why did that happen? So, we just got busier, our call volume went up. Well, here we sit in 2011, going into 2012. Pick up the newspaper, ask me how many police officers it takes to resolve the shooting scene down in the center of Emmaus at KMBT. More than we have. We've talked about this. So think about that when you're thinking about these cuts. Is it the full-time officer first? Or maybe is it a few part-time officers who are providing some services for you that are nice and they're luxuries and the people like it, maybe they need to go because of ours. So I'm imploring you to discuss that with us before making it happen. That's all I'm asking.
Are there any costs involved with the DARE program?
No.
Is that grant money?
None to us. It was grant money, Brent, but it became, the school picks up the tab for that, and I will share with you that program's on the chopping block because everybody's looking at the same thing. Everybody wants DARE to continue. I was the first DARE officer, so it's a great program, but if it becomes a discretionary decision, it could go.
That frees up officers' time though, right?
It
By
frees
not having
up
it.
officers' time. Fortunately, right now, the district's paying for our officers' time. They're reimbursing us for that. I don't know if next year or another year down the road, if the budgets keep going the direction that they are, it may end up going by the wayside. Sure.
Might I suggest 2 things? Asking the department heads, ask what they can cut. I mean, you asked them to cut, but if they had a choice between a layoff or finding more cuts, find out what those cuts are from each department head. The other thing is, I think we should move forward with, to see if there's any concessions from the unions. If they all say, no, we're not willing to negotiate, well, I don't think that looks too kindly on them when they're getting 3.9% raises and everyone else is sitting at home looking for work. Not everyone else, but 9.1 at least. I think we should do that and say, first of all, council has to decide what concessions we would like. Instead of maybe a 3.9 increase, are you willing to go with 3% increase, 2.5? I doubt they're going to start paying for health insurance. Maybe they're willing to, get half their uniform allowance or something. But we need to ask. If we don't ask, and they say, no, we're not going to, we need to tell them, our workman's comp insurance went up $150,000 because of your coworkers. Those are expenses that we have, and we don't have the money for it. What are you willing to see? And we have to, that should be the first step before layoffs, is asking for concessions. They did it in most of the school districts. Now, some school districts, the teachers union said no, and others like East Penn and Easton, I believe, there were several of them that were willing to, have less of a pay increase for 1 year.
And if I may, I think you're on point there with respect to, you're going into 3 contract negotiations next year. There's no harm in asking for a meet and discuss, and then essentially you're setting the table for upcoming discussions that I think any employee in this borough knows isn't going to happen. You have to be realistic to not think that there's going to be negotiations and requests for concessions and give back. So I don't see any harm personally as a department head, you approaching the employees and requesting that. And it sets the table for early next year when you're going to be thrust into negotiating for these concessions anyway. So certainly you can ask. There's no harm in doing that, certainly.
I would draw caution in, I think we should do that step, ask for concessions, but you have to extend any of the current contracts.
Oh, I would be against
I feel like that would probably be what would be asked of. That's just predicted, asking for Chief House. A lot of what I heard you give an example of sounds like the police force that has grown to almost capacity, and yet is still getting infiltrated and needs to get greater resources in order to keep moving forward, to keep up with the element. I read in the past we've been invited to discuss regionalization. Please, I'd like to know your opinion on that.
Regionalization is a long discussion for a very long meeting or lengthy meetings, but I'm not opposed to it on its face. What I would caution all of you to recognize is that if you enter into a regional agreement, my sense is that you want to ensure yourself of what you own. For example, you have so many police cars, you have so many police personnel. What I can tell you about the new regional effort that is afoot is it was spearheaded essentially by McCungy. I was with the majority of the municipalities this morning, all of them in fact that were invited, and there are 3 municipalities already who are opting out of the meeting alone, and I don't think there's any harm in going to the meeting. But I think what everybody's fearful of right now is, and what you have to concern yourself with is, if we regionalize with other municipalities, you might see a situation like that happening in Upper McCungy Township right now, where if a municipality opts out, do you get back what you invested, is my point. And that has to be very carefully drawn out, that these officers came from Emmaus, and you don't want to lose those, and this equipment came from you, and you don't want to lose that. The regional effort has already been explored, and it's happening on a county level with certain specialties that we just can't provide. We need smaller and medium-sized departments. We're already sharing resources. I wouldn't want to share with the public the price tag on some of our incidents resources that we receive mutual aid at no cost to us. We share those resources because we just know that we all don't have what we need. I think discussions about regionalization are healthy. I just caution you that you want to concern yourself first with what you have in Emmaus and what you own. And you can't just hand it over to somebody else, walk away and say, well, now it belongs to the group. And you lose a sense of your own local control in doing that, because then it now becomes a commission, and either one or two of you may serve on that commission, but not this full council is going to make decisions on what happens to former Emmaus officers. And don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed, but that might be the future. The last time we broached the subject was the early 90s. I have a study in my office. You're willing, I'm willing to share it with you. What happened in that case was all East Penn School District municipalities entered into an exploration of a regional concept police department for the district. And what happened was municipalities slowly started to pull away from that. Lower Macungie being one of them, Albertus was next, Emmaus later on, and then Upper Milford. And what you had was fractions of different municipalities who remained in there, and all those larger municipalities got nervous about the things I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a bad concept. I'm saying it needs to be done correctly. I talked to, after your question at the last budget meeting, I talked to the chief from Berks Lehigh the next day. I have a draft of this budget in my office, however, it's not public for 2012. What it's looking like, it's going to be about $1 million more than our proposed budget for next year. Again, it hasn't been decided upon, and they're facing the same issues we are now. They have municipalities saying, well, we don't know if we want to continue doing this. Then what happens is the same thing we're talking about. Which officers get furloughed, who gets the equipment, and that all has to be decided upon before you ever walk in the door of a regional police department. So what I'm saying to you is it's going to take some time. I'm going to attend the meeting, to be frank with you. Leanne, I believe you said you joined me with that. I want to hear what they have to say, because I work in a regional environment with the DA, and I'm not opposed to it, but I'm very protective of what you own also. This is your community, these are your police cars, these are your men and women that you pay for. And I'm not going to go handing them off to Macungie or anybody else. If we're going to lose some of that service, then I think you folks have to decide, do we want to lose some of our people, some of our equipment? Do we want to downgrade our services? That's an answer for the community, not me. So in fairness, I think you really have to have some long, lengthy, serious discussions about that.
Am I realistic in saying that this would never happen unless Lower Macungie is involved? So if they decide, no, they don't want to do it, it's not even a discussion then.
Right.
Lower Macungie's driving the bus right now in this school district because they're the largest municipality without a police department. I spoke to the manager from Lower Macungie this morning, because at the dedication from the state police barracks this morning. And right now, there is no intent for Lower Macungie to change anything.
Right, so it's a mute discussion right now.
So if we show up at a meeting with us in Macungie, with us in Emmaus, Chief from Alberta says, told me they're not going. Berks Lehigh struggling with hanging on to Upper Macungie. Macungie's deciding now, do we want to start our own police department? Do we want to have the state come back in? So this is serious stuff going on regionally right now. And what I'm saying is maybe in the future, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, we're going to see a Lehigh County or maybe northern or southern Lehigh County regional concept come to pass, because we just can't afford to do it anymore. All I'm asking you folks to do is be protective of what you own. You paid for this stuff. You built that building. The residents did. I'm not necessarily interested in handing it over to the country right now, and they may very well have another motive of which to displace their police officers to another area. And I'm not going to get into that. But they may have an agenda in doing so. I mean, I'm involved in the background discussions of this, and there's a lot of cold feet with this whole idea of this meeting. I think it has merit, long-term regionalization of services, and maybe consolidating. We might not be there yet.
This won't affect next year's budget, so that's also a moot point.
If you wanted to regionalize today, if you wanted to join the Berkeley High Regional Police Department, you would be about 2 to 2.5 years out to sign contracts, work out the pensions, get your slice of the pie, get the lawyers to work out the legal wranglings of how your department works, and which one of you has standing on that police commission. Could be you, might be one, but then you're going to lose a sense of your authority and control over what you have. What I say is, let's keep what we have at least and go from there. And if we have to downgrade or cut services, we do. Then we talk about the regionalization.
Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, one thing, I don't know if you do this or not, or this is the second time you brought up regionalization. Obviously, it's an issue that you might want to look at. But the one thing I would ask you to do is to talk to our constituents, talk to the residents. I don't know if you do that or what. I don't know if you're getting out there and talking with people, but it really will surprise you, and it surprises me. I don't like raising taxes. I don't like doing any of that. But it does surprise me of how many people will say, I will pay for, where are my taxes going? A police officer, an ambulance personnel, or fire for public works. Our ambulance corps does 4 minutes, responds in 4 minutes. If we had an option of taking out an ambulance and having Lifestar or Citronia come in, you're looking at literally life or death for people. So if you're okay with that and you can sleep at night saying, you know what, we're going to save a couple bucks, but a person's life. I mean, but I just really, it's the second time you brought it up, and I'm disappointed in it because you got to talk to your constituents, and I'm shocked at how many people say, I'll pay for a police officer.
Hey,
I really
that's
am.
not fair, because I brought it up and Wes has brought up exploring it too, so why are you picking on R? Because other people have said it too.
Nate, if you were to
Wait,
talk
it's
to
not how it works.
afterwards.
It's not you. It's not how my committee meeting runs, okay?
Yes.
We're not attacking each other personally, we're looking at ways to cut the budget.
This is
I
an
appreciate your
objective
input, I
budget.
appreciate your input, I know it bothers you personally, but this isn't the place for it. Other points directed towards the budget or the police chief. Mr. Reinhardt.
I'm looking at this from an objective standpoint. It's not about if I hurt feelings or not. We need to look at it objectively. We need to take all accounts into play. Right? If I hurt someone's feelings, talking about objective facts, or, you know,
Okay, now, for us to continue talking like this, I don't think will do anyone any good. I think what we need to do is, I need to take this home, I need to look over copy 2 that Mr. Neely provided, I need to look over this memo, I need to read it again, I need to digest it, and I need to determine what we need to do next. I believe we're going to have to schedule some meetings with department heads, we're probably going to have to talk to unions, but I want the Budget and Finance Committee to make those decisions. I believe the next best bet is Monday night, come back with what you think we should do. Mrs. Gilbert, is there anything you want to go through tonight, any recommendations we need to make tonight?
No, I don't think so, not at this point. Just keep one thing in mind, we do have interviews scheduled tomorrow for police officers, because we did make the motion.
The motion has been made to hire 3 officers.
To fill those 3 vacancies. And hopefully, Monday night, those names will be coming forward to hire.
Mr. Barrett?
So on Monday, we should be prepared, based on what you said, as a full council, or were you referring just to your committee?
I was referring to our committee to come forth with some recommendations to bring forth the full council about here's what we're hoping to do. Bring it forth to full council and get full council's,
So we can
what
expect
full council
to
thinks.
discuss, the committee will talk about it, but also at the council meeting, you will present some ideas.
Present some
And that will
ideas.
most likely open up discussion amongst.
Discussion
all
amongst
council.
us again to where this is going, how we need to move forward. I mean, I think we need a plan to move forward. I need a little time to formulate that plan, and I'm not sure what that plan is at the moment, but if everyone's okay with that, I believe we need a plan to move forward.
I think one of the main things we're going to need to do is schedule a budget meeting and meet with each department head. That's going to have to be advertised. Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Mr.
My
Young, please.
suggestion is that, difficult decision, but not a complicated decision. I think we need to get through what I wrote, I can just see. But I think a meeting even as early as next Thursday, maybe afternoon, that we can advertise at least on press, we have time to advertise for a meeting for the Budget and Finance Committee to sit down after you've gone over these things and you develop a strategy. I think it's going to be strategy development more than in terms of how to attack this, than it is, okay, here we're going to sit down and go line by line at that meeting.
I agree with you. I agree. We need a strategy.
And my concern is that you have 15 minutes before the Borough Council meeting on Monday. That's just simply not enough time for everybody to get everything out on the table and develop that strategy.
So if we make a decision tonight for a meeting next Thursday, it's still possible to pull off.
Sure.
All right, well then I'll make a recommendation that we schedule a meeting for next Thursday, 3:30. You make 3:30? You can make 3:30?
I cannot make it.
You make 4 o'clock?
Cannot make
You
it.
can't make it early.
I work. I gotta work.
Oh, I thought you scheduled your normal committee meetings at 4 o'clock.
For my health and sanitation, once a month. I take 2 days once a month to get the committee meetings on time.
Okay.
Outside of that, I can't, I can't.
Okay, well we'll have to schedule without you, Mr. Reinhardt, because I may have to be at a baseball game as early as 5:30.
Exactly,
So I'm gonna recommend that we schedule that meeting next Thursday for 3:30. Is there a time that's better for you, Mr. Reinhardt?
How about next one, a week from tonight? Let's get together at 7.
Yeah. No commitment at night next one. I committed to have to read it.
Right.
We wouldn't have time to advertise. The first chance we have is Thursday. The earliest I can be here is 3:30. And that's not asking our department heads to go above and beyond. And our department heads have lives
What
too.
about the following week? I mean, if we push
Well,
it 4 more
well, can
days or
we-
5 more days?
Can we as
It's just the committee, so pick a day.
Thursday? I mean, it's the first chance we have. We want to meet with our department heads. Let's do it Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't even care if we do it on Saturday.
Wow. Are you expecting the department heads to?
If it's at 3:30, I expect the department heads to be here.
Is that your goal, or?
Yes.
I mean, it sounds
My
like.
goal is to meet with the
We
department
need to
heads.
meet with the department heads.
So you think that, I mean, we could do that individually? I mean, I think that, we'll start with R on this one, I think the committee should meet as a committee, but I know it doesn't always work, we have times in all of us that we can't make meetings, but.
Well, what I can do is I can put some thoughts together. I think we know how, the recommendations coming forth will end up from a numbers perspective, but,
Put some ideas together for Monday, let us know what you think.
Exactly.
Let's schedule a
That's
meeting
what I'm
for
gonna do.
Thursday at 3:30 to sit with department heads. If you have a chance to email or call the department heads and tell them how you're feeling and talk to them, even if you have a chance to see them, I think it would be in your best interest. And maybe you can do that before Thursday and they'll say, yeah, we met with Mr. Reinhardt, we know where he stands and he knows where we stand. And we can get that input by then. I mean, I think we need to move in a timely fashion is my only concern. That if we sit and wait 2 weeks now, I'm afraid of how far we're pushing it into the future when there's things that are going to need to be done quickly. Mr. Ladenburg.
Your first statement that you made, I agree with everything except you made the statement. I had brought up about meeting with the unions with concession, and you said that the committee will discuss that and we'll decide if we'll move forward with that. I don't agree with that. That should be decided by council.
The committee will make a recommendation. The recommendation will come to full council.
Whether to go to the union or not?
Yes. And I believe we can discuss that in those,
And it's
once everybody
Three
reviews.
separate unions, correct?
There's 3 unions, correct, yes.
Public Works, Police, and the Secretary.
I believe we all need to digest this. We'll come back Monday and we have those, I mean, they're only 10 minutes, but I believe we're going to have points that we're going to very quickly and easily agree
And
upon.
then just one more thing.
All right,
The,
thanks, Tim.
Thank you for being here, Chief.
The
Get
memorandum,
better.
the memorandum that Craig put together, would it be appropriate to give that department heads and let them read that?
I'm going to give them a
Thank you. That's all I want. Thank you.
Please, Chief.
Today, I was in the company of probably primarily all the police chiefs in the valley, including a lot of state police officials. And I just want to make a point and dispel some rumors, which I did today up there. But obviously, there's discussions going on all over about furloughs and especially with police. But particularly, Advance came up this morning to me. There's interviews happening tomorrow, of which there are police officers from other jurisdictions who are interviewing for these jobs. And the question I got from those chiefs was, we saw that those positions were approved during the budget, but the officers are concerned that they would be laid off. And here's the point I want to make. beginning next year, you have eligibilities for retirement commencing, starting with me, and then another sergeant. And then as the years progress, you're gonna see several officers who are available to retire, not meaning they would wish to do that. In the event that you make a tough decision this budget year or next budget year, I think you have to keep in mind that the person who would be furloughed would be that eligible person who could otherwise retire. So I made that point to these chiefs today because some of their officers are saying, you know, we really want to come and work down in Emmaus, but if they're going to appoint me and 3 months down the road I'm not going to have a job, I'm out on the curb, literally. So the point is, keep in mind that next year, you already have 2 officers eligible to leave. And if there are layoffs, they must happen with the eligible retired persons first before new employees. Just a point I wanted to make, and so that you're all aware of that. In other words, I would have to leave and you would replace me. And then the next officer available to retire would have to leave and you would. That's how you would do a furlough. Not necessarily say, hey, here's your new badge and 3 months from now, you know, it's tough times, you got to leave. So I just want you to
When is your eligible retirement date, Chief?
fall next year.
Thank you.
Would it be equal to, if you retired and we didn't replace that position, well, we obviously would replace the chief, but then
Hopefully,
that person, if it's from within the ranks replacing you,
Right.
then, and we had the option of not replacing them, is that what you're kind of saying?
You have that
If
option.
we know at
Right.
that point we're
Right.
behind and we need,
Right.
we're running a deficit. and we-
Exactly what I'm saying. And
It's an option, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that to dispel the rumor among, I was approached by the FOP president this morning. Hey, I hear Emmaus was talking about, but of course we're talking about the budget, we're talking about every option. What I want you to understand is, don't necessarily think as you're interviewing police officers tomorrow for vacancies that exist and we desperately need, that you have to pull the switch tonight, tomorrow, or in this budget. You have options available, and I want newer officers coming in. If I'm forced out, I'm forced out. But I want newer officers coming in, you know, recognizing that they have a job. And we have current police officers in this valley that want to come here for a variety of different reasons. Smaller departments, better chance for advancement, things like that. So I'm asking us all to be professional about our dialogue with layoffs, and I'd rather not see that show up in the press, obviously.
Mr. Laidler.
Did the budget numbers reflect 3 new officers being hired at the entry level for police department?
Yeah.
And a reduction in overtime wages also?
Yeah, we're,
Right,
right
the
now.
budget reflect that? Because
Right.
there should be a
Right.
cost savings, right?
Right, and we can discuss maybe even looking at, you know, that's something we can discuss even, reducing even more. And then it would become an issue of if you got a full staff, then as many departments are doing, then you have to mandate and not allow overtime in certain circumstances. There are some circumstances we must provide overtime. For example, call-outs, homicides, bank robberies, detectives got to come out, you have to pay them. But there could be times where you wouldn't replace somebody with full staff. Right now, you know, we 4 full-time officers down, one's injured, he'll be back.
So one work missed comp right now.
Yeah, he's coming back in 2 weeks. It was a knee surgery, he's fine. But those 3 vacancies exist, and what I'm asking you is to not necessarily go right for the throat and say, yeah, it's got to be a police officer layoff now because we're in the process of replacing vacancies, and officers are looking at us to see whether or not, you know, their jobs are being jeopardized. It's a 5-year tenured officer in a department, you know, a 10-officer department, which we have one candidate, and is looking to come to a somewhat larger department. He might not necessarily be inclined to take that job if he knows he's not going to have a job in 3 months. So I remind you, you do have the opportunity to furlough tenured officers next year. And there'll be 2 and 1 the following year, actually, to be honest with you. Does that mean I want to get rid of myself? No. But please keep that in mind in your
And
discussion.
even if we replace the retirees, it's going to be at a reduced cost with salaries also.
Right.
Any other comments? Personal appeals, any personal appeals this evening?
That was mine.
You were well past your 5 minutes.
All right, upon hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
So,
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the Budget and Finance to look into CRD, had a meeting last week for a grant for $2,000. So I would ask as a wish list, if you can, we can add that into the numbers.
You're asking for that to go into the 2012 budget?
Yes, $2,000. What it is a matching grant from the tree vitalization grant from the Lehigh County. And we have, if we use our public works, that would be considered as a matching in-kind service. That's what it's considered. And so, which is 20. So overall, for $4,000, we're getting, for every dollar, we're getting 4. So $1,000. At the end of the day, it's going to be $1,000 for $4,000.
So we're going to invest $2,000 and get an $8,000 investment in the borough, is that what you're saying?
$2,000, we're going to get $4,000 investment.
Okay.
We're going to be replacing trees.
It was a 3-0 vote from the committee. I supported it in the thought process that we're asking for $2,000, which means we need $1,000 of public works effort to plant the trees for 25% matching. We need to come up with that other $1,000. My thought process was go to the business community and that those trees are going to be outside and put some skin in the game. You get yourself a new tree, which you've been asking for. So basically, it's a phantom line item that we hopefully never truly see our dollar go out.
But in the meantime, you're asking that we put $1,000,
$2,000.
$2,000.
It's a revenue.
That would be
Yeah.
expensive.
It's revenue.
We have to get the $2,000.
We have to come up with the match.
Yeah, we have to come up with the match
I
first.
understand that. 1,000 is,
And if we do
wages,
not-
1,000 is,
And if we do not use it, we don't have to use it.
We don't have.
Yeah, so it's not like it's in the budget. But it was a 3-0 vote, and the CRD committee did say, we did say to have the business owners chip in to maybe cover that extra $1,000, or make a dent into it.
you could figure
Figure
out
out
how much
that
it is per tree,
to the next
and then you
budget.
contribute what the difference is.
Yeah, and we're looking to replace 10 trees, by the way.
Well, that's good.
And I can forward the replacements if you would like, where they're going to be.
Sure. Go for a walk, you can show.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Mrs. Dillon.
Second.
All those in favor? 3 ayes. We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time this evening. Mr. Reichert,
You know,
get us
another thing
information
that-
for next
another thing to
coordination
watch is
public.
the,
We'll talk about Monday.
Department.